So what
So what
happens if
happens
I
if I
want
want
to
to
create a
create a
sign
sign
that's
that's
too
too
long to
long to
fit
fit
in
in
my
my
3018
3018
CNC
CNC
machine?
machine?
Well,
Well,
it's
it's
not
not
too
too
hard to
hard
make
to
a
make a
sign
sign
that's
that's
twice
twice
as
as
long
long
as
as
the
the
Y
Y
movement
movement
of
of
the
the
3018. So
3018.
the
So the
3018
3018
will
will
move
move
180
180
millimeters in
millimeters
the
in the
Y
Y
direction.
direction.
So if
So if
I
I
mount my
mount my
piece of
piece of
wood,
wood,
there's
there's
room
room
there
there
for it to
for it to
stick
stick
out the
out the
front and
front
the
and the
back of
back of
the
the
3018.
3018.
And
And
I'm not
I'm
going to
not going to
have my
have my
stuff come
stuff
right
come
to
right
the
to
end
the
of the
end of the
stock.
stock.
So we're
So
going
we're
to
going to
set a
set a
line
line
at
at
3
3
centimeters
centimeters
from the
from the
edge.
edge.
And
And
then
then
if I
if I
mark a
mark a
line
line
at
at
180
180
millimeters
millimeters
from
from
that
that
line I
line I
put
put
on
on
there,
there,
that'll be
that'll
my
be my
center
center
mark
mark
for my
for my
sign I'm
sign I'm
going to
going to
create.
create.
So
So
now,
now,
when we
when we
go
go
over
over
to
to
Carbide Create, we can select our stock, and I'm using a 1x6 piece of pine, so that when you actually measurement it's 132 millimeters wide now, and we'll set the height as 360, which is double the distance the 3018 will do. Set the stock thickness to 15 millimeters, and here's where it's important. Now we're going to set the tool path 0 to the center left, and we'll select retract height to 5 millimeters with everything set to millimeters and select OK. So now if I take the text tool and I'm going to make this in Bookman Old Style Regular, and I'd like to write out miring. So hit apply there. Now we need to rotate that, so I can hit the rotate symbol. We'll type in 90 degrees here. So that's good. And now I need to move. I can center that into my piece of wood. So I can select this, align centers. Now it's sitting in the center. And then I can resize that too. And the max height we won't go right to the 360. We'll go 358. Apply. Now that's centered on my piece of wood. Now, I won't be able to cut all of that in one shot. So now what we need to do is use the text tool again. Select the same font style. So Bookman Old Style Regular. And if I look at this, the letters that don't cross the center are M, E, and Y. So we'll start with M, E, Y, and we'll apply. I'll have to rotate that. We'll rotate it 90 degrees. Not sure I didn't do that right. Apply. And then I want to put that on top of this. So that if I set the width now, and this was a little bit of trial and error, but if I set the width to 74, that will fit directly on top of the existing one. So once I get it perfectly lined up there, and you can zoom in to make sure that is in fact where you want it. And then we can do the same with the ERI and then the ING. So first thing we'll do is we'll take this and we'll go to Tool Path and we'll select Contour. I'm just going to make this into a pocket, and we'll rename it so we know which one we're looking at. MEY. I'm going to have to edit these speeds. They're the defaults for the Shippoku. So I'm going to have to uncheck set speeds automatically. I've got an updated spindle in there, so I'm going to cut a little faster than you'd be able to do with the stock one. So I'll do depth per pass at 1 millimeter. I would suggest with a stock machine maybe a half a millimeter. And the feed rate, I'm going to go at 400 and 400 for the plunge. With a stock spindle on there, you might have to go at half of that. So that'll cut the MEY. And that'll reference from this center point. So when we go over and look at our stock piece of wood, we are going to line up the spindle. So first we're going to bring the table all the way as much forward as we can because it's going to be cutting these forward letters to it. So we're going to line up the starting position with the table as far forward as it can go. And I just got it to cut a small little mark in there so when I reposition the wood I can line up that mark again. So if you can see that, the spindle is lined up with that center mark that I made at a mark 3 centimeters plus 180 millimeters from the edge of the wood, and that's going to be my reference starting point. So in Carbide Create, we can do that tool path for the MEY, and if I show the simulation, you'll see that that's just cutting the MEY at the one end of the piece of wood, which is what I want to do. So we'll save that G code and we will call it MEY. So in Candle, I've zeroed my X and Y for that starting position. I've set my height, my Z height properly. So we'll open up that file. And I just gotta find it here. And you can see it's starting off in that corner and then I'm going to cut MEY. So I've started up my CNC. We'll send this to it. And it'll move from that corner and start cutting the letters. And as you can see, it's just finishing up the M on MEY, and that is towards the front edge of the board, exactly where I expected it to be. So I now have MEY cut into my piece of pine right up to that 3 centimeter mark that I had started with. And there's another angle so you can see it. And now what we're going to do is do the next letters. So now what we do is we pick the ones that are going to cross over the center mark. So we can only do a couple of letters before we once again run out of the 180 millimeters of travel. So I'm going to select ERI, and so I went to the text tool, set them on top, rotated them. The width ended up being 59.5 to match up exactly to the full miring that was sitting there. I've disabled the MEY, so if I disable that, now that won't be part of the group anymore. And we're only going to look at the ERI, and if you look at the simulation, you will see that it's ERI, and it's putting that near the center. It's going to start here and draw it out. So we can save that G code as ERI, and then we can bring that up in Candle. open ERI. And you can see the starting point is more in line with that E. So we're going to have to reposition everything so that we can start here and have movement to do the R and the I. So on the ERI, the E is sort of at the center point, and the RI are going towards the back of the board. So what I want to do is bring the table not center, but towards the back of the machine, the table towards the back, and then line everything up so I have room for it to bring the board backwards to do part of the E, and then bring the board towards me to do the R and the I. So we're going to line up the spindle exactly again to that center mark that we put on the board. So let's see if you can see that. All right, so the table's mostly towards the back of the machine. I have lots of room left for it to move towards the front. And I've lined up exactly with that mark again. We can zoom in there so you can see that. So you can see I've lined back up with that mark, and we can start cutting those pieces. So we'll send the G code to it. And it's beginning to cut the eye there by the looks of it. So that's actually sitting this way on the table. So it has finished cutting the ERI. So now what we have to do is go back, finish creating the rest of it. So we go into Carbide Create, and we have to do the NG. So I go back to the text tool. We select the Bookman Old Style Regular, and we're going to be doing the N and the G. Apply that. We have to rotate it 90, apply, and if I set the width of that to 56.50, and that was found through some trial and error, I can now drag it and set it right on top of this N and G to make sure I've got it in the exact right location. I can zoom and check that. So then I can go to Tool Path, we'll go Contour, and we're going to do it as a pocket. And we're going to have to edit this bit because once again it wants to set the speeds automatically. We'll do 1 mil per pass. Do this at 400, do this at 400, and OK. And we'll label that as NG. So now if I look at the simulation, it'll do the NG at that end of the wood. And we can save this G code as NG. And I can bring that up in Candle, NG, open. And you'll notice it's starting way over here and then doing those last letters. So we need to make sure we leave enough room that it can travel that direction and do the NG. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we bring the table all the way to the back. Oops. So I want the table all the way as far back as we can go. So I'm just going to keep going back, and that's it. That's all the way back. And now we're going to reposition the wood to set it up to the center line. So we've repositioned the piece of wood so that that initial starting point is back right underneath of the spindle, lined up again, and you can see from that's where it's starting from, and then it's going to go towards the back of the board to finish those letters. So we've got it lined back up with that mark. We've got the table as far to the back of the machine as we can so that it can move it forward to cut those letters. So we'll hit send and send the G code to it. And it's moving to the back. And it's going to be cutting that G. All right, and so you can see that it's finished cutting the complete name on there. And so maybe I could raise it up a bit here so you can get it out of the way. Oops, that's about the end of the travel there. So that is it completed. And that was cut with this bit here. Doesn't cut perfectly. Does it nice and fast. So I cut it as a pocket. So you'll notice on the Y, for instance, here, it didn't quite complete it all because the bit was wider than the letter. Maybe you can see it better from this if I zoom in so you can see it. So on the Y there, it couldn't cut it all the way to the end because the bit was wider than the trace of the letter. All right, thank you very much.